All right, we're on Terumot Perek Daled Mishnah Gimel, and we finally come to the wonderful question of how much Terumah do you have to give? So I just want to remind you that, there we go. I want to remind you that Midoraita, you have to give a kol shehu. There's no minimum amount. But the Rabbanan felt that that was not appropriate, as we can see, as we understand. And so then we come to the famous formula that Chazal derived for us. Says the Mishnah, Shiur Terumah. What is the measure of Terumah? Ayin Yafeh. Remember, since there's no set amount, so then they gave guidelines. Ayin Yafeh means a person who's generous. Echad Ma'arba'im, 1/40th. Beit Shammai Omrim Mishloshim. Beit Shammai says 1/30th. V'habenonit Michamishim. Ayin Benonit, meaning a moderate, normal person, 1/50th, 2%. V'hara Mishishim, and someone who is an Ayin Ra'ah, meaning a little bit stingy, 1/60th. Now I want to point out that Terumot says Benonit Echad Michamishim is Lavdi, that's not Beit Shammai, that's the Tanakama. Ume'ayin Yafeh de Beit Shammai, Atalamed Divrahem Ayin Ra'u Benonit. So, Afagav de Lotani Labamadit. The Mishnah doesn't tell you the rest of Beit Shammai's opinion. He says, but you can derive what Beit Shammai's opinion is. So, we know Beit Hillel says this is the famous formula that we know of. According to Beit Hillel, how much do you have to give? So it depends, a 40th, a 50th, or a 60th. If you don't know, now you do know. Okay? From Beit Shammai, though, we can learn. So the Terumah says that we can learn from Beit Shammai, from Beit Hillel also. So I assume what he meant was, if he starts at 1/30th, then 1/40th and 1/50th. So that's the nature of their machloket. But we, of course, pass on like Beit Hillel in this case. Okay. So now, Taram v'ala biyado echad mishishim. Let's say I gave Terumah. I took off Terumah. Now, it's very important to remember that we said you're not allowed to give Terumah with exact measurements. Remember, we learned that in a Mishnah. Let's see where I can find it. In Perek Aleph, Mishnah Zayin. Let's go back to Perek Aleph, Mishnah Zayin. Ein tarmin lo b'midah, lo b'mishkal, v'lo b'minyan. You cannot take Terumah by measurement. It has to be be'omed. It has to be approximate. I'm just going back to our Mishnah, Perek Daled Mishnah Gimel. Okay? So if so that's going to make evaluating or trying to take off Terumah, it's going to make it sort of a guesswork. Now I want to give a 50th. I want to be Benonit, but then I did it, I taram, and I had only a chad mishishim. Says the Mishnah, Terumah, that's the measure of Terumah that you took off, and you don't have to take off more. But chazar v'hosiv, if I went back and I wanted to add more, chayab b'ma'asrot. Then I have to designate ma'asrot, because, let's just use our illustration, I have now, I took off Terumah, I took off two bags worth, or one bag worth, whatever, okay? And it turns out that when I measured it, turns out that's a 60th. So now if I want to take more, this is already chulin. Okay, so since it's already, not chulin, it's already had Terumah designated, Terumah has already been separated according to halacha, at least according to the minimum amount. So therefore now it's chayav in ma'asrot. So if I want to take off more, from that pile, this second bag, I have to take off ma'asrot from the bag of Terumah. I have to designate ma'asrot because it's already chulin. If I wanted to give it to the kohen. Okay, that's what the Terumah says. Chazar v'hosiv chayav b'masrot. Why? Dekvar niftaru ve'ein shem terumah chal al masha mosif. He's already patur, and it's not ein shem terumah chal al masha mosif. The name Terumah doesn't fall on what you add. Therefore, hatosefet hazot have a tevel gamor v'chayav it b'masrot. This second bag is not Terumah. This is Terumah. This is a nice gift you want to give to the kohen, and it's appropriate, and it's wonderful, etc., etc. But it's not Terumah, and therefore you have to take off ma'asrot. Next case. Ala bi'ado shishim ve'echad. What if in the first bag I took off, okay, it was 1/61st, i.e. you didn't meet the minimum requirements of Chazal. Then says the Mishnah, Terumah, that bag is Terumah, that grain you took off is Terumah. Ve'yachzor v'yitram kamot shehu lamud. B'midah, b'mishkal, u'b'minyan. And then you can go back and take off the amount that you wanted to, that you intended to take off, b'midah, b'mishkal, b'minyan, by counting or by measuring or by weighing. Meaning, even though we saw the Mishnah in Perek Av Mishnah Zayin that said you're not allowed to measure b'midah, b'mishkal, b'minyan, that's only originally has to take omed. But afterwards, oto motar shu torem, the extra that you take off Terumah, motar litrom b'midah or b'mishkal. The lo amro litrom me'omed, we only said to take off Terumah approximately me'omed, ela betchilata Terumah. That's the very beginning. Okay, so that additional Terumah that you take off, you can measure. I'm not sure if you're allowed to do it lechatchila, but it would seem to be a good strategy. You take off, a small amount, You say, oh, I didn't reach enough, and then you can take off, because it's very hard to take approximately and get to the, like, Chazal are giving you approximate. They say, okay, but I want to give a 50th. I want to give 2%, but you can't measure. So it's a little bit tricky. Nonetheless, the additional truma you can do b'midah, b'mishkal, b'minyan. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af shelo min hamukaf. Even shelo min hamukaf means not from adjacent truma, not from adjacent, produce, not from adjacent tevel. There's a halacha that says that you have to have mukaf is karov v'samuch. We normally say, when I take off truma, I can't say, okay, this truma that I'm taking off is for my storehouse in Beijing. Or, Tel Aviv, or Haifa in Yad Binyamin. You can't do that. It has to be mina mukaf. It has to be adjacent and samuch. So here he says, Savar Rabbi Yehuda, en tzarich litroa mina mukaf ela b'tchilat truma. So Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, everybody agrees you have to take off truma mina mukaf. That's only the original truma. And just like we said, normally the original truma has to be be'omed, but the additional truma can be b'midah b'mishkal. Rabbi Yehuda says the additional truma can also be shalom mina mukaf. The Chachamim disagree and say that all truma has to be mina mukaf, even the additional truma. We'll stop here. If you have any comments or questions, as always, contact me at arspolter@gmail.com. We'll dedicate this learning to the memory of my father, Rab Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a great day.